Welcome, everybody, to Keep on the Borderlands 2016. We've got our first panel going on right now, and this panel is going to be all about rising winds. We're going to reach way back into the history of Amtgard and talk a little bit about how the geographically largest kingdom, if not by population also, became a kingdom. What were its origins and what are the trials and tribulations, successes, and stories that lead us up from whenever they were founded up until 2016. As typical with each one of our panels, we're going to quickly go from our left to our right, learn a little bit about each of our many panel members we've got here from the Rising Winds, and see what they've got to add to the team. So we'll get things started.
Hi, I'm Paco the Kung Fu Penguin. Started in 1999 in the Shire of then called Crusaders Cove. My hope is to provide a Flurb's perspective on our history.
Hi, I'm Sir Cads. I started at the exact same time as Paco in Crusaders Cove, and I hope to provide you all my personal perspective of the history.
I am Squire Kai E. Squire. I also started in Crusaders Cove, but in 2000, I hope to provide a female perspective along with someone that has taken a break briefly and then come back to basically a brand new group is what it feels like.
Hello, I'm Sir Smurf. My first Kingdom event was Rising Wind's first Kingdom event. I've been to every single one since then.
Hi, my name's Dekland. I started in the Pacific Northwest in BSR. I've been playing Amtgard since 1996, and I've been doing foam fighting since 91. And I would like to give the perspective of a transplant from the Pacific Northwest to the Midwest for their Amtgard style.
Hi, I'm Sir Ash. I started playing way after these guys in 2005, but I've had a rather recent, more profound interest in the kingdom, and I hope to provide that perspective as well.
Outstanding. I'm loving the fact that everybody's got their niche and their perspective, so I'm really looking forward to how that goes. Dekland, let's start with you real quickly. Tell us a little bit about the Rising Winds. If you've got 30 seconds to tell us about your kingdom, what would you tell the Amtgard world?
Well, I've played Amtgard from coast to coast, all the way from Maryland, all the way from Seattle to Texas, and I think that the Midwest and the Rising Winds specifically is probably the friendliest kingdom that I've been, in attendance to. And they're certainly the most accepting from an outsider's perspective. Okay. And that's what I really enjoy about it.
Kaya, how about you? 30 seconds. Tell us a little bit about your kingdom.
We are definitely the trolliest kingdom, but we're not. It's like we can be mean about it, but we can also be nice about it. Like we're trolls with a point, it seems.
Okay. Hey, do me a quick favor. I know we're competing with the rain. We're competing with everybody avoiding the rain. I have the pleasure of being really close to you. But let's try and talk all the way back to a couple seats in there. If we can reach all the way back there to Alana, who's joined us in the back. If you could try to get your voice to carry that far, I know everybody around us here would appreciate that, okay? Thank you. Okay. Wow, we've already got a nice list of questions here, but I'll throw a couple out there, and if you know the answer, let's just get the conversation going. So, when was the Rising Winds? What was the first park in the Rising Winds? Where did we start? Cats.
The first park in the Rising Winds was actually called the Rising Winds. It was a park in, I want to say, southern Indianapolis, and it eventually changed its name to Lion's Tomb.
About what time frame? Sorry, did you cover that?
I'm not sure. It was before I started, but probably like 98.
Yeah, 98 I think is when it was.
I
Late
believe
90s.
so.
Okay, was anybody in that first part? No? Okay.
Nope.
No, but it's been from my understanding though that the military presence from El Paso brought Amtgard up here in around 84, 85, and there were people playing around then until Lion's Tomb was actually made apart from the Burning Lands.
Okay, so, great. So not an uncommon story for parks and stars. And when was it made a kingdom?
I want to say 2002.
2002. We looked this up.
2002. And
Yes,
your
I've been playing
parenting
14
kingdom
years.
before you were your own kingdom was?
Emerald Hills.
Emerald Hills, out of Texas.
Yes.
Out of Texas, okay. Great. All right, so you know what? Let's just get things started. What's going on with your guys' Facebook and the whole your troll culture? I've got like 5 questions on it, so I'm just going to throw that out there to Ash. What you got?
Okay, so you have to understand, there's this strange dichotomy of like seriousness and silliness that we portray, and I think it's for a really, really specific reason. That a lot of times Amtgard takes itself like incredibly seriously, and a lot of times we are hitting each other with foam bats dressed in our pajamas. You know, and that's sort of the weird perspective. Obviously, it's much more than that. But when you get to a point where everyone online is like losing their mind over things of like relatively little impact.
Neon garb.
Yeah, like whether or not we can put neon colors on our garb or like superheroes. We feel like the conversation is so ludicrous that the only way for us to join it is to ridicule it. You know what I mean? And so that troll Facebook culture comes from, I think, somewhat of our inability to even take some of these concepts at the same level of like face value seriousness as other people. We love Amtgard, and we don't really take ourselves too seriously, and we're gonna make sure you don't either.
So at some point in time, somebody from Rising Winds decides that we've hit critical mass, and
Sometimes it's not even someone from the Rising Winds. A few years ago, Sir Potato decided that he didn't like how serious the conversation on his Kingdom board got, so he collected a hit squad of the most famous Rising Winders and said, listen, I just want you to post Spiderman memes in this thread about someone getting banned. And he had to once he unleashed us, he had to contain us. He's like, wait, stop, I didn't mean it. You know what I mean?
opened Pandora's box.
real.
Yeah.
Every single one, I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds, every single one was different. It was like a different Spider-Man meme from the old 1960s Spider-Man, which I'm sure you've seen if you know anything about us.
I mean, to be fair, we've pretty much always been a troll kingdom, I think.
Yeah.
Back when we had the Yahoo groups.
But we're a
there
lot
was
more
still-
famous now.
Yeah.
They're a lot
I mean,
more
it's,
famous
and
now.
We
it's
made
a lot
our
more
name.
widespread because it's a little more accessible. But like, this is not new in my opinion. It's probably gotten a little bit stronger, but it's always been there.
Well, we had Varus basically
Unleash us on the
unleash
entire
us onto
Amtgard.
the Amtgard page, and like Ashe got banned, and so that unleashed a second wave. Then someone else got banned, and just a wave of trolls.
I think it's interesting that both of you have come up with a good way to be like, it's not really our fault. Tato pulled us into their kingdom. Forrest pulled us onto the
Don't
main
take the fault
Amtgard
away
page.
from us.
No,
You know what you get. You know, it's like there's
You
a
know
sign
what you
when
did.
roll up into the Midwest that says,
I was not a
caution,
part of the
Rising Winds
attack on the Amtgard
territory.
group.
We're responsible for our own actions. Don't take that away.
Yeah.
Now, and here's the thing, okay? It's like the big brother, little brother syndrome. Like, we mess with ourselves, but as soon as somebody from the outside messes with us, we collectively band together and like, no, that's not right.
What's the line from Spider-Man? You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. So
Yeah.
That's from Mighty Ducks.
Whack.
quack, quack.
No quacking. All right, but we're talking to history because I think this alone may be its own panel. How to troll the Rising Winds way. We'll save that for Clan next year. All
That means I have to go to Clan.
right, back
Yeah.
to history. Okay.
Trolling 101.
But all right, history. So we started up, had Amtgard really from some of its earliest days because the military bringing it out here again. One of the big precursors for a bunch of lands. So who's been playing the longest, or who has the earliest recollection?
In Rising Winds or
Rising Winds.
total?
Rising Winds.
Paco,
I mean,
probably.
Paco,
the two
yeah.
of us.
Yeah.
It's an exact tie because
We showed up the same day, yeah.
Sir Kane, then just Kane, basically he was part of the early Crusaders Cove, and I went to high school with him, and he saw me in the hallway, told me about it, and it sounded cool, so I was hanging out with him, and
I invited myself to come and join
yeah,
us. Yeah.
I mentioned it.
Imagine my surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, he's been inviting himself to everything ever since. And somehow this panel, too. But we started on the exact same day. He played Assassin, I played Wizard, and
Because Assassin is so cool.
it is. It really is.
Okay, so early days. What was the state of Rising Winds when you joined?
We were a barony at the time, I think fairly freshly a barony.
Still that initial one part.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it was...
We were the second park.
Yeah.
Crusaders Cove.
I mean, there was Lion's Tomb, which was originally Rising Winds. There was Windmore Crossing, and there was us. Later, they combined to be Griffin's Perch, so they're kind of one park.
And that was the Indianapolis park, where the Crusaders Cove was the Valparaiso, which was like in the Chicago region, like the
Yeah.
suburbs of
Okay.
Chicago.
We're in the armpit of the
essentially.
Midwest.
We're
Yeah.
like the only people
But
on
still
Central
individual
Time.
parks.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All under Emerald Hills.
All under Emerald
Yes.
Hills,
Okay,
but
so
also
we'll
under
say-
the Rising Winds. It was a weird time. It was
Yeah.
like a principality before principalities existed.
Got it.
Those
So
are
let's talk
cool.
about those early times and anybody's earliest time. But what was a challenge that you can recall? What's one of the earliest challenges that Rising Winds, whatever it was called at the time, faced?
I mean, I remember one of the biggest challenges for the original parks, based on what I've heard, because I wasn't around specifically for this, but there was just a lot of, like, the northern and southern Indianapolis parks were really not getting along so well. They decided to come together as a group, but they weren't really socializing. And there were a few key people like Rigel that kind of actually went to the other park and said, hey, let's start talking. And they started socializing more, and that kind of brought the groups together. And then eventually the rest of the parks kind of followed suit after they got created.
And that can be pretty common, right? I mean, especially a bigger city that can actually has the population support for multiple lands.
Oh, yeah.
One group gets a little bit angry. That's it. We're moving to south side or north side, east or west, and next thing you know.
And it was
they've
more,
got their own thing.
it was more because one of the groups was like a whole bunch of people who had been playing since the 80s and were kind of isolated, and they were like in their 30s and stuff like that. And then this new park shows up full of young people who are like more trying to embrace the modern Amtgard. And it was those two that were kind of butting heads. And finally, some of the older people kind of acted as mediator and got them to get along and combine their parks.
Great. Okay. How about that? Anybody else? Some early challenges?
Well, I think logistically working with the Emerald Hills because there was no principality rules at the time, and there was no set way that the Burning Lands could promote principalities. So for the longest time, we were a loose confederation of shires for the longest time. So logistically, we would have to go to Clan or go to Emerald Hills proper to like advertise ourselves as, hey, we're here. We need some help moving in a positive direction.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I know you've got Northreach, right, in Alaska. They're doing great things, but their kingdom's in New Mexico, on the Texas border almost. You've got Northern Empire. It's in Canada, Golden Vale, Winters. I mean, that experience, you guys were some trailblazers, but it worked for you.
Right.
So let's give some tips there. How did you make it work?
Having 300-person events helped. Like, it helped a lot. Our camping events, were consistently 250 to 300 people. Even our winter events were getting 200 people. And we're talking winter events where it was cold, almost snowing.
Blizzards.
Blizzards sometimes.
So how did that help? I mean, that can help you become a kingdom, but how did that work with your relationship with the rest of Amtgard? Because we're talking, Amtgard was pretty sporadic and the internet was not
Yeah.
And
as
the internet
useful
really
as a
wasn't
tool,
there.
right?
Yeah.
Right,
We-
yeah, exactly.
We had Yahoo groups.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we were making pretty strong presences at Clan back in those days too.
Yeah.
But having 300-person events that had a lot of camaraderie in those events, they were huge events, but they weren't separate camps that kept to themselves. No, people came together a lot, and it was very common for groups to always wander around from camp to camp and feel welcome. So I think that had a lot to do with the culture of the Rising Winds as it is today. So we still kind of have that.
Was that intentional?
I just want to add,
Yeah.
that you asked how this relates to how we interact with the rest of Amtgard, and I think that there's a crucial point here that the Rising Winds interacts with the rest of Amtgard in a very strange way. And I think part of that comes from being so curiously isolated and yet not having a population problem. Because I can't imagine that Alaska's pulling 300 people, you know what I mean, for their winter events. You know what I'm saying? We had a lot of influence from outside of Amtgard, but at the same time we had to grow it all right in the middle of this otherwise empty wasteland of Amtgard. And somehow it didn't turn out to be dysfunctional. It just turned out a little strange,
Compared.
It is a lack of interaction with the rest of Amtgard to some extent that I think shapes it.
It's certainly not strange to us.
No.
yeah.
I think the rest of Amtgard is strange.
Why doesn't everybody use Spiderman memes?
Yeah.
Well, they do. They just use you to get them on their board. What?
I think one of the key things, though, was they touched on the older players that had been playing since the 80s. Those people were pretty instrumental of going down to the Emerald Hills and convincing their key players to come up here and experience what the Rising Winds was doing specifically with our large events. Because I think statistically the Rising Winds has larger events than anywhere else in the country, especially with Keep the last 5 years. You know, we've dwarfed Clan we have for a long time. Spring War also, you know, most of our events hit at least the number of people that Spring War has. So I think convincing people to be like, hey, we're doing something really cool here, you should probably check it out. And then they take that information back to the parent kingdom and be like, we need to help these guys go in a forward direction.
Okay. So you were a principality before there were principalities.
Right.
And sounds like, I think you were also the first Roman crown. Is that true? Or early Roman crown?
I think so.
Yeah.
We've always had a Roman crown.
Yeah.
Was that just a natural growth, or was that a conscious decision to really try?
We felt Satic crown sounded weird. We don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I've never.
So I guess it was a natural.
We thought
growth.
it'd be discouraging to people that are not inside the kingdom, the capital, to do any kind of political action if there could only be. Right.
We had a static crowd. Right. No one know who I was. Right.
Like having one capital and your king can only come from there. That sounded horrible to us.
Yeah.
So it sounded horrible. So you were around whenever that decision was made?
No, it just sounds horrible in
It
general.
just sounds horrible.
Okay.
I was around when the decision was made, but I wasn't part of the decision making.
Okay.
And I'm kind of an exception. I'm the first king in a while that's actually from the central crown lands. For the longest time, we've had kings in Wisconsin. We've had kings in Kentucky, Ohio. Our next king is going to be from Ohio, you know, which is really far to the east. So we encourage people from like outside of the crown lands to run for office and get involved in central politics.
So what's the northern border? Using the U.S. map.
Michigan.
If we can use
Michigan.
it.
Northern
and
Michigan.
We go how far south?
Kentucky, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Not
Kentucky.
all of Kentucky,
Like-
northern Kentucky.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
East.
Ohio.
West Virginia.
Yeah, West
Oh,
Virginia.
West Virginia.
Yeah.
You're right.
West Virginia.
You're right.
Okay. And then west.
Illinois.
It used to be Polaris, but now we kicked them out
Dragon-
recently.
Is it a Dragon's Tail?
Yeah,
Dragon
Dragon's
Tail.
Tail.
Oh, no,
Illinois.
wait, hold on. Don't we have a park in Paducah? That's even further west than that?
No, that's inactive, I think, but they're trying to
We
like
had a
bring
park
it
that was
back.
even further away. Like, they would
We'll give
drive
you credit for
straight
that. What state is that in?
That's
That's
it.
Kentucky. I'm
It's like
sorry.
Okay.
far west
Kentucky's
Kentucky.
right west.
Okay.
And don't forget Croatia.
Yeah,
do
we have
a park in
Croatia.
Croatia.
Oh,
We've
I
had a
don't.
park in
I think
Croatia
they're
How did
pretty
that
well
happen?
defunct by now.
No, they're
Let's
not.
talk
They
about
still have a
Croatia.
bunch.
You want to talk about
Do they?
Croatia?
Mud honey.
Yeah.
Last I looked, it looked like they didn't have any attendance.
They just don't put anything in New York.
Okay, that makes sense. That I was bummed at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
I don't know. Anyone else?
There's this one guy, his name is Ivan, and he's definitely Croatian, is the thing. So he's the one that runs everything over there. The park is named Krovin, which is Croatian for blood honey. And I must have been someone in the military, maybe WISP or something. But he got the spark put in, this guy named Ivan, and he didn't have anyone in his whole continent to play Amtgard. And LARPing is very large over there, but they don't really play Amtgard. In fact, their LARPs can be far more like serious and like realistic.
They're more cosplay oriented than
Yeah.
actual
Yeah.
game oriented.
And to be fair, I don't know how much Amtgard he really plays like we play it, but he needed some group to like sponsor him, and who better than us to have a random party in Croatia. And he gives us reports. He's like, "Hi guys, I've talked to you in 18 months, but we just ran a cool event in a real castle.
Here's photos."
Flying
It's like
around
It's
everywhere.
like here's
in Europe.
photos of our boat
Yeah.
paddle on an actual river or
And
something.
we're like, you go, Croatia. We're never gonna disband you. You can talk to us. So I guess our most western border is Croatia.
Yeah.
Fair
Which,
enough.
if you want to talk geographic borders, yeah, what are the rest of you doing?
What do you have the
What do you
entire-
even do?
Well, if we go, technically, is it west or east? Because I think it'd be closer, technically east.
Yeah, we
Or
span the
eastern
globe.
and western.
Yeah.
We have an ocean, really, is what it
The
is.
sun never sets on the Rising Winds Empire.
Good Lord. Okay. Again, I have to I got to remind myself that this is the history panel. So, some earlier challenges in Indianapolis, and slowly but surely grew out. What are some other another early success or an earlier challenge that you want to tout you overcame that you want to share with us?
I mean,
Well, I think we should talk about how we got removed from the states.
Oh,
Okay.
I was gonna
yeah.
Oh,
State
okay.
Park
Okay,
incident.
so-
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Rising Winds, a lot of the players here have been playing for a really long time. Okay, so me being a transplant from Washington State, I had already been playing, 5 or 6 years out in Washington. I came out here, and the culture at the time was a lot of underage drinking and just a lot of minors running around. pretty much doing whatever they wanted. Well, at the time, we were at state parks. So we literally were kicked out of every state park in Indiana at one point.
The state park department.
The state park
Yeah.
department banned us, the Rising Winds, from going to any of their state parks, which led to us finding a permanent private site. And that's when we really started to grow as individuals and as a kingdom, because we had a very specific rule set. Like, this is our last chance. We either behave here or we don't have any place to play.
Yeah.
So at that point, we're like, all right, the leadership at the time is like, we have to really clamp down on this. And it just happened to where the people who were drinking actually became of age, and then we just matured as a whole in the Rising Winds.
Yeah.
And to where it is now, where it's socially unacceptable for minors to drink at any of our events, and it's dealt with very swiftly and very harshly.
Were there some specific rules that were put into play, or was it just a, hey guys, we have to follow the law? I mean, how did that look like? What did that look like?
Well, there was the wristbands.
Yeah.
Like that's a new thing.
Wristbands.
Yeah, like you would have to show up on site and find the securocrat or whoever, and it was a show the ID. You're 21. Okay, you get a wristband. And now when that was first implemented, it was very soft because I wasn't 21 yet when that started. I still got drinks from the securocrat while he's handing out wristbands. But then we got kicked out of the state parks, and it was a kind of wake-up call of, oh shit, we need to behave ourselves. We actually have to follow with the wristbands.
There was a time, for the longest time in the Rising Winds, where like I would say 95% of the population was under 18, and the only responsible adults were like wannabe frat boy man children. So we literally had no one looking out for us. So it's really the kingdom collectively grew up as a whole, which was kind of a weird phenomenon, really.
Yeah, we started banning people for drinking too, and that wasn't happening before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that,
That helped
I
a
think that may let it be known that we were actually serious about, no, we're not dealing with the underage drinking and the problems that causes.
So and it sounds like there's a lot of focus about drinking and stuff like that. Was that pretty much the biggest problem, or and that's where you attacked, or what?
That was the problem with the state parks.
Yeah.
And I think
That was the
like,
biggest problem.
After we left the state parks, which was right when I started playing, like right when they made the transition over to our private site, which we called Fallen Rock, people started seeing the actual consequences of just no like oversight whatsoever. You know, people got hurt in the process. People that don't play with us any longer. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to go into any specifics, but like after that happened so many times in a row, where you lose a person because of what happens because of the collective, misbehavior of everyone. And as we grow older and are capable of recognizing those consequences on a personal level, it keeps being harder to continue that kind of lifestyle or attitude, because you have to live with the fact that you're actually damaging people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that we all laugh about those times, but the reason we don't do it anymore is because we realized it was really just not good for the game, not good for the people involved, and not good for our continued growth. We just couldn't keep it up.
So were you already a kingdom at this time?
Yeah, barely.
Barely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was part of the problem, really, because we could do whatever we wanted. You know what I mean? Like,
There was like the
we're a
celebration.
kingdom now.
Yeah, there was a celebration. Like, yeah, we did it, cool, and
No one was coming to check on us.
yeah.
And Denny touched on it a little bit about the frat boy, wannabe culture, but you also mix that with a large former military presence, to where you're 18, you can vote, you can go die for your country. But
like, why can't you drink?
Yeah.
So there was an acceptance culturally to a certain degree. If you're 18, you can drink.
Yeah.
So, and that was damaging at the time.
Yeah.
That not a lot of people recognized that it was damaging at the time.
Sure. Okay, so I know we're in the state park right now, but this is a joint thing with Tal DeGore.
We're not in Indiana.
I know. Are you allowed back in New
They
York?
let us know.
They lifted
I
the
think
ban.
it was like 2007 or come They're like, you can come back if you want to.
Please come back, because we miss your
we
money.
would like your money now. You can come back. So.
And then the first keep was in 2010, so that was way after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good deal. So, what else? What else does Amtgard need to know about your history?
I think that's something that really has been left out here is we really like Amtgard. We really
Like-
like wizards and class games.
Yeah.
And making
Oh, yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And
That funny game with the bows and wizards.
yeah, that Amtgard has always been a huge integral part of our culture. You know, this waxes and wanes depending where you go, but we've always loved flurbs, we've always loved wizards, and we've never, as a culture, tried to raise that. Not that we don't have respect for stick fighting. There's some excellent fighters that have come out of the Rising Winds, especially in the last 5 years or so. But we've always kept the actual full game of Amtgard in the forefront of everything. And so at the same time that we were having all these problems with drinking during the day, even if you weren't into that, you were getting this enormous push on the full Amtgard game. And I think that's also why we're a little strange, because you can go places where the events are hardly anything but ditching. You never find that in the Rising Winds.
And that's going to be my next question. So the class battle game is the full battle game is pretty much your core staple at events.
That is
Yeah.
the
Right,
epitome.
for sure.
Amtgard.
The Amtgard
The thing
part
in
of
the rule
Amtgard.
book.
The thing in the rule book. Yeah. Brennan said about the Rising Winds once, and this was I want to say 8 years ago, that it seems the rest of Amtgard ditches competitively and has class games on the side just for fun every once in a while. And it seems like the Rising Winds is the opposite. And it's not so much the case anymore. We do have competitive ditching, but we also have competitive class games that we take somewhat seriously.
Somewhat.
Somewhat.
Are you kidding me?
I will say, and with no reservation, the Rising Winds is probably one of the most well-equipped for actual class games than probably the rest of Amtgard put together. As
I
far
would
as
love to
as
take
far as gear, armor,
No World War.
spellcasters,
We're laying down the
the
challenge.
whole thing. So,
Yeah.
and when you look out at Keep, you can tell who the Rising Winders are.
I think you guys pretty aggressively adopted is it the Phoenix League? I think is that the right term?
Yeah.
We didn't
Right,
adopt
yep.
it. In fact, we haven't actually competed.
We're
in it
planning on
much.
running a game in October.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We played several times.
We've had a lot of park days that have been doing it a lot.
Okay.
Gathering our gear together, doing seeing if we need to tweak the rules at the national level, doing our play testing, and then we'll be having events very soon.
And I believe that's a team out of Golden Vale's put that together, right? I can't remember their name.
Tyler Salvador, I don't know
Yeah.
what his Amtgard name is.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's Canadian, right? Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay. I just want to make sure I give the right credit where it's due because I'm also pretty excited to see where that comes from. So let's talk awards just for a little bit because the really trying to wrap my mind around so many different venues that we can learn a lot from the Rising Winds. It's a pretty massive kingdom, right? I know we're talking, you got a number of significant large events and things like that, so no taking the easy way out, but so how do you address awarding and recognizing folks whenever you may have not so much Croatia, but Western Kentucky folks, but your king is out in Ohio?
Yeah.
How are you overcoming that to make sure the right people are getting the recognition they deserve? Guys, you shifted your weight, so you know how I operate.
Yeah.
What's up?
Jinx actually started using it, Dame Jinx, and I'm a big fan of using just a Google form. It's have as a survey where you say, who do you recommend an award to? Why do they deserve it? Who are you? All that sort of thing. And you get this giant, nice spreadsheet of the responses. And I post that to the Maiden Rising Winds group, and people share it to their collective
You share the
subgroup.
list or you share the form?
I share the form.
Okay.
I don't share the list.
Here's all the nominees.
It's all-
Now what do you agree with?
it's all anonymous. But and one thing that we do is what Amdar and I have been doing. He's my regent. Is we have a wandering lower court at events, and we hand out 40, sometimes 80 awards with this lower court, and it's everything below an eighth. And we travel from park to park, park camp to park camp, and hand it to them in front of their friends, very loudly and very celebratory. And that makes it so our actual court is very short, so we're not handing awards out, for 3 hours to the entire
So
Rising
let me get
Winds.
there. So at your big event,
Our big
right?
event.
Your big event, you've already scheduled time where your leadership or whomever goes around to where folks are camped
Yeah.
and recognizes them there.
Yep. Wandering lower court.
It's also worth mentioning that there's a huge part of the Rising Winds, no matter how far away you are, everyone comes to Indianapolis, the Indianapolis area, to our big events. So, Ohio and Western Kentucky are the same distance from Indianapolis. You know what I mean? And so everyone meets up 4 or 5 hours away from wherever they live, you know what I mean, in the center. And if you're getting a Kingdom Award, you're probably getting it for something you did with all of us. So it doesn't really matter if you're from Ohio or Western Kentucky or Michigan. You did it in that crazy fantasy space we call our Kingdom.
We also have a lot of regional events. Like Ohio has a few events, Kentucky has a few events.
Like 3 or 4 parks will get together and hold like a joint coronation or something.
Yeah.
And then they'll invite people from out of town to come to those.
Okay.
They give out some of those awards.
Obviously, we've shifted a little bit more from the history, which is nice, but talking a lot about the culture, the Rising Winds. You mentioned about a woman's perspective. I think you did.
Yeah.
I'll insert it later in the tape.
No.
But
Did you get your
mind sharing
fiance up here for that?
I mean, what's it like being a woman player in Rising Winds?
When I first started off, there wasn't a lot of female fighters, and I know some people kind of like would be like, "Oh, haha, you're a female, like show us your jugs" or something like that. And yes, I did fall into the whole like during a tournament, do like the whole like, "Oh, look, here's me," but like Kat said, like we kind of grew up from that, and so it's like I've grown up. I've stopped becoming a stupid 16, 18-year-old. I like that there's more females out here. They're actually fighting out on like the ditch line or in a battle game. They're not just off to the side, just like, oh yeah, I'm just here because my boyfriend dragged me, la la la. Like they're actually becoming participants in the game, whether, like I said, it's out on the field or maybe doing A&S stuff. So I was like really happy about that because like when I took a break, there wasn't a lot. There was some females. It was like I came back, and everybody that I had started off with, him in particular, kind of grew up and became a leader.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
like how you said him in particular.
yeah. He was a goober back then. Still is a goober, but he's a more responsible goober.
So who was the first night of Rising Winds?
That would have been
Rigel.
Rigel.
He was our first golden suitcase night.
Yep. We used to call them white suitcase nights because they would get belted and then they would never play again.
Oh.
And I would say 25% of our first nights within the first 4 or 5 years got their belt and never played again. So culturally, we were leery, to knight people because we didn't want them to leave.
We're gonna miss them.
They were deserving, but like, we're going to give you this, and then your brain's going to explode, and you're going to leave.
It's like, and honestly, I've talked to other people, and I'm just saying, like, from my personal perspective, like you said, you would get the white belt and then just be like, okay, peace. And you're like, but I really like that guy. Where did he go?
Oh, yeah.
It's actually kind of bizarre how few of the original people we still have.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I think that's directly affected by the fact that we didn't have knights here to pass on how to be a knight after you got the belt. There wasn't a real good knight-squire relationship because we were basically isolated. Sir Brock and Sir Glavis, they were belted in Emerald Hills for their accomplishments in the Rising Winds, but they were belted in Texas. And their squires really didn't stick around after they chose to leave the game. So we basically, up until maybe 2007, have been forging our own way as knights in the game. And since then, we instill, at least I do, to my squires on how to be a knight after you get the belt. So, and I think that's helped a lot because statistically we have retained a lot of our knights, from 2007 on.
Mm-hmm.
Smurf, you've been pretty quiet.
Got a question?
Spotlight's on you. What do you want us to know about the Rising Winds?
We're the best kingdom in Amtgard. Oh yeah, ask us and we'll tell you.
Okay, so let's take away the size, the big attendance, the battle games. Round out the top 5 reasons. You've got 2 more spots. What makes Rising Winds the best? And it better be within the idea of the history, which is what this panel is supposed to be about.
The sense of humor that we've developed over the years and the comfortableness we are with each other. We can pretty much say anything to anybody and have honest conversations with people instead of having to like hide behind closed doors and like do all the shiftiness. And also, I think what our night circle just did in trolling Cads at the meeting earlier is an amazing part of our circle. So everybody in the circle abstained, and he voted yes because we disagreed with how he was bringing up a candidate.
We like the candidate.
We all liked the candidate.
But we didn't like how Cads
Yeah,
did
we
it.
didn't like how CADS approached us as the advisory board to the Rising Winds.
I said,
So,
I don't know how deep we can explore this because I don't want to try and air your business.
Well, we're very open. I
right,
essentially said, hey, I want you guys to vote on him so I can knight him tomorrow.
And so the entire circle abstained, and he was the only yes vote.
Which of course passes because we like the guy. We
Right.
think he should be a knight. But we still like Cads. Right. He does something. Right.
But I can't imagine that happening anywhere else.
Right.
there's no way.
All right. Well, there you go. We'll go around the down the table here in a second, but time's starting to wrap up. So we just got a couple last minute big questions. But was there ever a point in time where you thought that the kingdom of the Rising Winds had hit a critical mass and was going to split or break or?
Well, we did twice.
Yeah.
No, we have twice. Tal de Gore and Polaris. We've birthed two of the biggest sub-kingdoms in our area.
But was that a polite? Because to hear them tell it, it was a pretty polite splitting. There's a difference in, hey, we've grown up and we can do our own thing, and
Get the hell out.
Oh, no.
Tal de Gore, yes, Polaris, no.
No, with Tal de Gore, we wanted them gone.
why?
Because they were ready to be their own kingdom, okay? And for whatever reason, they kept being stalled because at the same time that we had Tal de Gore trying to become a kingdom, we also had Ohio trying to become a kingdom. So we're like, well, we need to get rid of these guys because they're ready and focus on Ohio. And that was like, because you have Sir Wisp and Sir Conrad and all those guys that are very capable of running their own kingdom from day one. They just had to put their time in and align with the bureaucracy of becoming a kingdom.
Telegraph also, like, they didn't feel like Rising Wind. It didn't seem like they wanted to be Rising Winders. Like, even before they were kingdom, they were like, no, we're Taldegor or Western Gate or whatever.
We'll accept your help because we need to.
Right,
Yeah.
but we deserve this already. You know what I mean? So the very first thing that they did when they became a kingdom was start invading our parks and and just randomly showing up as a whole kingdom to attack and be like, now swear your allegiance to us. Like they were almost like trying to convince parks to swap over that were on the Borderlands to push the border east.
So
seriously.
Rising Winds hates Tal de Gore?
No, we
Is that
love
what I'm
him.
No,
hearing?
not at all.
I know, but
It's like our
Loves
our
them.
bastard. So
They're the kid we could have done better on.
is that why?
Have you seen Polaris?
Polaris is our golden
Polaris
child.
is the good
We saved for their
They're the
college
golden child.
education.
Right, yeah, we're sending Polaris to college. Tal de Gore went to a trade school.
They say.
So is that? I've only heard this second, third hand probably. But, so I've heard there's a rule: Rising Winds principalities have an expiration date.
No.
Is that why? Am I wrong?
We do have an expiration date.
Do we officially have an expiration date?
I believe so. I actually don't remember what it is. We just kind of let Polaris keep track of that.
Well,
They're like, our time's up, guys.
I guess we could go back to Ohio because I guess there would be an
Did they
expiration
expire?
date.
Yeah, they did expire.
Because they had X amount of time to get their shit together, and they didn't. So they're not a principality and they're not a kingdom. So I guess technically we do have an expiration.
And they can always try again.
Right.
Yeah.
You see these principalities every now and then that have been around for a decade. You know what I mean? Or it seems like forever.
Yeah, isn't there one in California?
And what's happening with them? Is it happening, or are they just or we don't want anyone content to be a principality because a principality is just a baby kingdom.
It's what it's supposed to be.
That's what we believe. And if you can't make it past that point, then you aren't a baby kingdom. You're just a bunch of parks in the Rising Winds. And so you don't get to be a principality and make your own rules and stuff. You get to be one of us again. And there was a time where Midgard, which was the principality that was Ohio, they had their whole principality thing, and when they failed, obviously there was a lot of divisiveness that happened. But over time, we've just taken them back, and now they're core Rising Winders. Our new king is from that principality, and he's as Rising Wind as it gets.
And they just held a pretty successful event like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. For us, Principality is put up or shut up time.
Define successful event for me real quick.
Battle Cry had over 100 people at it. They run classes and battle games. They're kind of a little concentrated on actually the classes, ANS classes, cooking classes, that kind of thing. And it's successful battle games. Over 100 people, I think it's a successful local event.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty much the definition, I would think.
The games and quests are really good too.
Yeah.
Okay, we're coming to a closure in time. So really, Ash, we're going to start with you, but if the viewers only have 5 minutes and for some reason they skip to the last 5 minutes, what do you want to make sure they know about either the culture or the history of Rising Winds?
Okay, so if there's one thing that you need to know about the Rising Winds, and I think that the history and the culture sort of play into it, both of these things, is that at its core, Rising Winds loves Amtgard, and not to say that that's just ours, that only the Rising Winds can love Amtgard or anything, but it's our passion for the game that's defined everything. At the end of the day, we all get together to play Amtgard, and rarely do we let anything else be any more important than that. And at the end of every day, you can't even form strong cliques in our group because everyone's going around talking about all the Amtgard they played with each other. And so we've been able to become a unified environment because we focus so much on just this game that we love. And the drama's never really been able to permeate that. And it will always be that way, I think, because it's such a strong emphasis that we put on the entire game that we play, and how that will always be the forefront of every issue in Rising Winds. Garb standards don't really matter to us, because that doesn't really affect our game, in our minds. You know what I mean? And so, while the rest of Amtgard is arguing over what we're allowed to have on our Garb, the Rising Winds just can't bring ourselves to care because it won't change our game to us.
Dekland, how about you? Closing thoughts?
I think my closing thoughts is socially, the Rising Winds as a whole is pretty accepting to new people and really wants to show them a good time. Like last night, if you walked around at all last night, there were all kinds of different people from different areas socializing together just to have a good time, because we're all really here just to have a good time.
I would say that the stuff you see online, try not to take it too personally. We're really just trying to have a good time. We really just have a good sense of humor, and we want you to get in on the joke too.
Kai?
Along the same lines, we may have that trolly, gruff exterior, but once you get to know us, we're some of the most passionate, kindest, accepting people that you'll find. And so, we want you just to come on and join us, to have fun, swing foam, and laugh with us.
If you come to a Rising Winds event, you'll have, I guarantee, the most fun Amtgard that you've ever had on the field, and afterwards, you'll have a really good time and you'll be accepted by just about everybody, as long as you're not a douche.
Even then,
you might be accepted.
We have our douches.
Paco, that's some pretty tough things to follow up, but what you got?
I can't really say a whole lot more. They've all touched it pretty close to what I would have said, but it's always been about having fun for us, and whether it's getting on the ditch line and spending all night under the ditch lights, playing battle games, role playing, we've got a strong culture in all of these things, and I think more than any other kingdom, we really touch on the whole of Amtgard better than anybody. So, like Kat said, just come have fun with us is what it really comes down to.
And that's a great way to finish up the panel. If I could, a quick round of applause for our amazing panel members. A round of applause for you, the audience, and the amazing volunteers to help put this together. Really appreciate everybody taking some time out of what's turned into now possibly rain-free event, but a great event, as every keep is. So thanks everybody for your time, and have a good time. Thanks.